Be honest. When's the last time you picked up your phone just to check something, and 45 minutes disappeared? That's not a willpower problem. That's a design problem. Some of the smartest engineers and psychologists on the planet spent the last 15 years making sure that happens to you. And today, I'm going to show you how to outdesign them. Not by fighting your phone, but by making your actual life more interesting than the feed. Hey, welcome back. If you've ever tried the classic advice, just delete the app, just use a timer, just set it to grayscale. You know it works for about 4 days. Then you're right back to it. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Those tricks are fighting the symptom. The scroll isn't the disease. The scroll is a painkiller for boredom, for stress, for a brain that's starving for stimulation. It isn't getting anywhere else. So instead of another digital detox video, I want to do something different. I want to show you the actual psychology of why your phone wins. And then, section by section, how real research on boredom, flow, novelty, and awe can help you build a life so genuinely engaging that scrolling starts to feel like the boring option. 4 ideas, real studies, and simple ways to use each one starting today. Let's get into it. Let's start with a question that sounds simple but isn't. What actually is boredom? For over a decade, psychologist John Eastwood at York University has been studying exactly that. His definition is the one most researchers use now. Boredom is the uncomfortable feeling of wanting to be engaged in something meaningful, but being unable to. It's not about having nothing to do. It's your attention failing to latch onto anything satisfying while you sit there acutely aware that it's failing. And here's the part that explains everything about your phone habit. Eastwood has pointed out that because boredom feels so bad, we reach for whatever banishes it fastest. Not what's most fulfilling, what's fastest. A video app is basically engineered to be the fastest possible escape hatch from boredom ever built. So how does it actually hook you? 2 mechanisms. First, variable rewards. Every swipe might deliver something amazing or might not. You genuinely don't know until you look. Researchers describe this as small hits of dopamine released with each scroll, paired with that uncertainty, which is exactly the kind of unpredictable reward pattern that keeps behavior compelling and hard to put down. Second, and this is the sneaky part, tolerance. Some researchers use the term TikTok brain to describe what happens after a lot of this. Your brain's baseline for what counts as exciting enough quietly rises. Slower, quieter forms of enjoyment. Reading, a slow walk, a real conversation start to feel understimulating by comparison, not because they got worse, but because your bar for stimulation moved. Here's the story that makes this click for a lot of people. Picture someone. Let's call her Maya, who used to read a novel a week. She starts using short-form video during a stressful semester, just as a study break. 6 months later, she picks up that same novel, reads 2 pages, and puts it down. Not because the book got worse, but because 2 pages doesn't deliver a hit fast enough anymore. That's not a character flaw. That's a recalibrated dopamine baseline, and it's reversible, which is genuinely good news and something we'll come back to. So section 1's core idea. The scroll doesn't satisfy boredom. It just interrupts it over and over without ever resolving it. That's why 45 minutes in, you don't feel relaxed. You feel kind of hollow because nothing you wanted was actually met. You just got distracted from noticing you wanted it. Here's a feeling almost everyone has. Childhood summers felt endless. Adult months disappear in a blur. Why? Psychologist Matt Johnson, who studies this, points to novelty as the main driver of how long time feels, not how long it actually is. As we age, fewer of our experiences are genuinely new, and the brain compresses familiar, repeated events into something almost weightless in memory. New experiences, on the other hand, get richly encoded. Lots of detail, lots of neural tags, which is exactly what makes a memory feel substantial when you look back on it. That's the trap with routine. It's efficient. Your brain barely has to work to get through a day you've lived 100 times. But efficient also means forgettable. If every day looks like the last one, your brain files it away with almost no detail, and a month of those days compresses down to practically nothing when you try to remember it. Now here's where the scroll makes this worse, not better. It feels new. Every video is different content. But structurally, it's the same repeated motion, the same posture, the same 15 minutes over and over. Psychologically, it reads less like novelty and more like a habit loop, and habits are exactly what compress fastest in memory. You can spend 2 hours scrolling and, an hour later, struggle to name a single thing you watched. Compare that to something genuinely novel. A new hiking trail, a recipe you've never made, a conversation with someone you just met. Fewer minutes, but your brain is actually taking notes the whole time. That's why a single weekend trip can feel like it lasted longer in your memory than 3 ordinary weeks back home. Let's make this concrete. Two friends, same week, same 40 hours of free time. One spends most evenings scrolling, same app, same posture, same couch. The other tries one new thing a day, a different walking route, a recipe, a phone call with an old friend instead of a text. Come Sunday night, ask them both to describe their week in detail. One will struggle after the first 2 sentences. The other could talk for 10 minutes. Same number of hours, wildly different amount of life packed into them. So Section 2's takeaway. If you want your life to feel less like it's slipping through your fingers, the lever isn't more free time. It's more novelty inside the time you already have. And that doesn't have to mean skydiving. It can be genuinely small. New route to work, new coffee order, new person to eat lunch with. The brain doesn't need extreme. It needs different from yesterday. All right, so boredom explains why we reach for the phone, and novelty explains why the phone doesn't leave a mark. Now let's talk about the actual antidote, a state psychologists call flow. Back in the 1970s, a psychologist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, pronounced Csikszentmihalyi, set out to answer a deceptively simple question. What actually makes an experience enjoyable? He interviewed hundreds of people who did difficult things for no money and no fame. Rock climbers, musicians, surgeons, chess players, and found they described their best moments in almost identical language. Total absorption, losing track of time, forgetting to check the clock. He called this flow, and here's the counterintuitive discovery that came out of decades of research since. Flow happens far more often during effortful activity than during relaxation. Csikszentmihalyi actually found people reported more flow at work than in their leisure time, because leisure time is often too easy, and flow needs a bit of friction to work with. The mechanism researchers point to is a balance, when a challenge is a bit above your current skill level. Not overwhelming, just stretching. You get flow. Too far above your skill, and you get anxiety. Too far below it, and you get boredom. Scrolling sits almost entirely in that boredom zone from a challenge standpoint. There's genuinely nothing to get better at. You can't level up at watching videos. It's zero skill, zero challenge, which is exactly why it can run for hours without ever becoming satisfying, even though it's never unpleasant enough to stop. Here's a simple story that shows the difference. Picture someone who spends a Tuesday night 2 ways on 2 different weeks. Week 1, 2 hours scrolling on the couch. Week 2, 2 hours trying to learn 3 chords on a guitar they just bought. Week 1, they can't really tell you how it felt. Fine, I guess. Week 2, they'll tell you exactly when their fingers finally landed the chord change, how frustrating the first 20 minutes were, and how good the 21st minute felt. That gap, fine, I guess, versus a specific, vivid memory, is the flow effect in miniature. The practical move here isn't go find your one true passion. It's much smaller. Pick something with a visible skill ladder and put yourself one rung above where you're comfortable. Cooking a slightly harder recipe than last time. A slightly harder route on the climbing wall. A conversation topic slightly outside your comfort zone. The stretch is the whole point. That's the exact ingredient that's completely absent from scrolling. Csikszentmihalyi's research also points to a few conditions that make flow easier to find. A clear goal, feedback that tells you quickly how you're doing, and, critically, single tasking. Not guitar practice with the TV on. Just guitar practice. Flow doesn't split its attention, and neither should you if you're trying to find it. Last piece of the puzzle, and honestly, my favorite study of the 4. In 2012, researchers Melanie Rudd, Jennifer Aker, and Kathleen Vose from Stanford and the University of Minnesota ran an experiment on a very specific emotion, awe. Think. Standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, watching a meteor shower, hearing live orchestral music in a huge hall. That slightly overwhelming feeling of, whoa, this is bigger than me. They showed one group of people a 60-second video of awesome imagery, waterfalls, whales, vast landscapes. Another group watched an equally happy video, people celebrating, confetti, but nothing awe-inspiring. Then they measured how people felt about time. The awe group consistently felt like they had more time available, not happier in general. Specifically, more time-rich. Across their experiments, people who experienced awe reported feeling less impatient, were more willing to spend their time helping others, and reported greater life satisfaction afterward. The researchers' explanation? Awe pulls you fully into the present moment, and it's that presence, not the emotion of happiness by itself, that expands how time feels. This connects directly back to part 2. Remember, novelty makes time feel richer because your brain is paying close attention and encoding detail. Awe is novelty's most intense form. It's not just different from yesterday. It's bigger than my normal frame of reference. And you don't need a plane ticket to the Grand Canyon to get a dose of it. Researchers who study awe note it can come from something as accessible as live music, a genuinely stunning view on a local trail, or even watching a skilled craftsperson work. Here's a small, real-world example. Someone starts a habit of watching the sunset once a week, just stepping outside for 10 minutes, no phone, actually watching the sky change. On its own, 10 minutes doesn't sound like much. But months later, when they think back on that season of life, those Tuesday sunsets are some of the most vivid things they remember. More vivid than entire weeks of otherwise ordinary time. 10 minutes, once a week, punching far above its weight in memory. So the practical takeaway for Section 4, deliberately schedule small, big moments. A sunset. A walk somewhere with a real view. Live music instead of a recording. A museum you've never been to. Even 5 minutes of genuinely paying attention to something vast, on purpose, appears to do something scrolling structurally cannot. It makes you feel like you have more time, not less. So let's zoom out. Scrolling wins by default. Not because it's actually satisfying, but because it's the fastest exit from boredom available, and it never asks anything of you. Everything we just covered is designed to compete with it on its own turf. Boredom gets resolved, instead of just interrupted, when you actually engage with something, not distract yourself from it. Novelty, even tiny amounts, makes ordinary hours stick in memory instead of vanishing. Flow, a challenge just one notch above your comfort zone, gives your brain something scrolling simply cannot, a skill ladder to climb. And awe, even 10 minutes of it, makes time itself feel more abundant, which is the exact opposite of what a 2-hour scroll session leaves you with. None of this requires quitting your phone cold turkey. It requires building a life with enough real texture that the phone stops being the most interesting option in the room. Quick recap. Boredom is a wanting but unable to engage feeling that scrolling interrupts but never resolves. Novelty is what makes time feel rich instead of blurry. Flow needs a challenge just slightly above your skill level. And awe, even in small, local doses, can make you feel like you have more time, not less. Here's your actual assignment this week. Pick just one of these 4. One new small thing. One slightly too hard hobby session. One sunset. See what it does to how your week feels when you look back on it Sunday night. If this was useful, subscribe. I'm doing more videos digging into the psychology behind our habits, not just the surface-level tips. And I'd genuinely love to know in the comments, what's one thing in your life that's ever fully absorbed you the way Flow describes? The kind of thing where you looked up and 2 hours had disappeared, in a good way? Drop it below. I read every one.